Opioids now kill more Americans than guns or cars or breast cancer. And these overdoses are lowering our average USA life expectancy. Are doctors hooked on prescribing them? Opioids kill 115 Americans every day. Every day. These powerful narcotics were painkillers of last resort until an aggressive marketing campaign by OxyContin manufacturer Purdue and drug abusers discovering how to multiply the effect by crushing and snorting pills. Senator Susan Collins of Maine.
Mr. President, I've heard stories about criminals who actually scan the obituary pages to figure out when the family will be away at the deceased person's funeral so that the criminals can target that time to break into the family's home to steal these dangerous drugs.
Imagine that. Over the past 2 decades, more than 200,000 Americans have died from overdoses involving prescription opioids, legal drugs, and illegal opioids like heroin, fentanyl, a synthetic opioid 50 times stronger than heroin and 100 times more potent than morphine. We have an epidemic. The president has declared a public health emergency. How did we get here and how do we get out? Dr. John Dombrowski is a board-certified anesthesiologist and a board-certified addiction medicine specialist. Washingtonian Magazine named him as one of the area's top docs, and the website for his Washington Pain Center is dcpaindoc.com. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
How did doctors get hooked on prescribing these drugs?
Well, I'm not sure that we got hooked on it, but I think what we're trying to do is really do the best for the patient. Back in the early 80s, we were very cautious of these medications. Then we started being told that we need to treat pain aggressively, really in the late 80s. It was called the fifth vital sign. And we were going to be dinged, medical legally or just by withholding care. So just like if you had an antibiotic and you withheld that care, you'd get in trouble. So the pharmaceutical industry, the government got involved, and then physicians were told, hey, you can write these medications without much problem in terms of addiction. And there we were off to the races. So this really happened for about a decade we started doing this. And then probably I'd say about 15, 13 years ago, we did start to realize, my God, look at all the problems that we've created now. The road to hell was paved with good intentions.
Right. In his best-selling book, Painkiller, An Empire of Deceit and the Origin of America's Opioid Epidemic, Pulitzer Prize-winning New York Times reporter Barry Meyer noted that starting in 2007, distributors of prescription drugs sent enough pain pills to West Virginia over a 5-year period to supply every man, woman, and child there with 433 of them. With all the attention this crisis is getting, how common is it for a pharmacist to check back with a doctor before filling an opioid prescription?
That's a great point, and it is critical that we all talk to each other. And that's how you get really good medical care. If the pharmacist thinks something is going on, give me a phone call. I get those all the time to make sure, no, that's appropriate. This patient has cancer, they have bad osteoarthritis. I mean, you talk about West Virginia. Those guys work really hard in coal mines. They might have needed these medications. You don't know. That's the reason why there's that feedback loop to get to the doctor. Is this appropriate medications? Or perhaps they are seeing something that I don't know in terms of abuse potential or diversion potential,
right,
to get that information back to me.
Is there a squeaky wheel effect where the insistent patient can nag the doctor into writing a prescription because in managed care, the docs are under so much pressure to keep the conveyor belt moving?
Right. I guess there is that component, but at the end of the day, we never want to be pushed into something that's going to harm the patient. So we might even say, yes, I know it's going to be a lot easier for me to write a script for you, and then you're out the door. But that's not medically correct. We're going to spend more time to talk to you, to come up, figure out another way to taking care of you. Maybe we can get you off these medications. Perhaps you might have an addiction problem that we need to talk about. So I'm not going to write that script. Or perhaps you can go to a physician anesthesiologist who can actually do a pain injection or an implant or something like that to actually make you better versus a 2-minute script.
You mentioned the implant. I'm told you're involved with an innovative implant alternative. Talk about that.
Sure. So there are 2 possibilities. One is an implant for addiction. So right now, we know that there's a medication called naltrexone that's really been around since the 70s, both for alcohol as well as opiate addiction. Unfortunately, if I'm an addict, I don't like to take these medications because I can't get high. So a company called BioCorrect out in California has now made an implant that goes underneath the skin that keeps you sober 6 months to a year. Now, the other implant that's been around since the 70s is a pacemaker for pain. So most of these patients that started on opiate-based medications really have a pain issue. How about instead of drowning in an opiate, we can look at other technologies? And my goodness, we have those since the 70s.
I got about 30 seconds, but for our viewers' benefit, how can we be smarter healthcare consumers in this regard?
Great follow-up question. I think the bottom line is this the best medication for me? Do you have any other ideas that would be appropriate for my care? And again, the whole idea, most patients understand this, one pill is not going to be everything. So you might use a host of medications that really are going to make you feel that much better.
Is the government doing enough?
I think the answer is they're doing their best. Right now, we're not going to create more addicts. So right now, the American Society of Anesthesiologists, the operating room, we now know not to give you these pain medications. But more importantly, we've got a decade of patients that are now have an addiction potential or are truly dependent on these medications, that we have to care for them too. And they are putting a lot of money towards this.
Dr. John Dombrowski, I know you're a busy guy, so I appreciate your time. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Great to be here.